Hey everyone, welcome back. If you haven't, make sure you like and subscribe. So this week we're discussing photography. So I had the pleasure of chatting with Sam O'Keefe, who is a professional photographer and drone pilot with more than 16 years experience working for newspapers and public universities. Currently, Sam works as a staff photographer with the University of Missouri and teaches a class on visual communications in the School of Journalism. Sam and I discussed what it's like to pursue a career in the arts and performance, and he discussed his work as a photographer and photojournalist and shared with me his advice for anyone that might want to dive into photography. We also discussed the impact on social media with photography. So if you want to hear what Sam had to say, make sure you keep watching. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come on and talk to me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to be here and have a nice little conversation with you.
Yeah. So you've been a professional photographer for 16 years, which is a long time. So when did you first decide that photography is what you wanted to pursue?
Oh, it was in high school is when I figured it out. Did high school newspaper, wanted to do yearbook. So, got into it that way, wanted to be like an investigative journalist, was writing and doing articles for the paper, and then started doing photos and, to go with the articles. And it's like, oh man, I really like this. People would always compliment me on the photos, but I wanted to be a writer. So then it kind of got to the point where I was like, you know what? I'm really bad at this. I'd like to learn how to do this. I should probably like go to school for it. And that's kind of what led me down the path of like just diving in full time to want to be a photographer. And I'm very fortunate that I'm still doing it. And that's really all I've ever done.
Do you feel like because like some people, like I always wanted to be good at photography, but like I don't think I, even like in photo class, when I actually took classes, I don't really think I had like the eye. Do you feel like that's something that you learned or you can learn, or do you think that's just something like you have, like it's not something you can teach?
It's a weird profession. Like I don't recommend it to people when they're like, oh, I think I might want to do that. I'm like, just don't. Just don't. And like whoever the person is that's like, oh, I'm gonna do it, I'm like, then I'll show you the way, right? Like
Yeah.
you just have to want to make it work. So I feel like there's like two sides of the coin of photography, is like that eye for it. Like I just see cool things. I like know good photos. I can go somewhere and like appreciate something that most people can't, right? You can sort of like teach people that, like showing them cool pictures. Maybe here's how they saw it. This is how they got there. And the other side of the coin is like technical, like how does the camera work? What are all the settings? There's a lot of buttons on this thing. What do these all do? And you got a cat. You got to figure out how those two things work together. So, yeah, there's going to be another cat at some point.
Which cat is that?
This is Edgar. So this is Edgar Degas. He's our eldest, and then we got another cat, Bill Murray.
So
yeah, they're pretty popular.
I was gonna say they want in on the action.
Yeah, I can't lock them out of this room. Otherwise, they're just going to cry the whole time. So, I'm the co-hosts.
So you went to school for photojournalism, correct?
Yeah, correct. So I went to the University of Missouri. I went to high school in Missouri. They've got, the oldest and the first journalism school in the U.S. My brother was going there. So, at the time, it's like an hour and a half north of where I was going to high school in Rolla, Missouri. So it's like, all right, I guess I'll just go there for journalism. And then once I figured out they had a really good photography, photojournalism program, I was like, well, that's where I want to go. So unlike most people, I applied to one college. I got in. I was like, I'm going to go there. So very focused. I didn't change majors. I did it 4 years. And when I graduated, I was like, what do I do now? So that was even just a journey after getting a degree, right? You get this education, but you don't have the portfolio.
Well, I think that like people pursuing like their like a creative passion or like a hobby as a career can be really difficult, whether it's like acting or dance, photography, music. So it is really awesome that you like that's something that you really wanted to do and you enjoyed it and you actually were able to turn it into a career. And now, you're a photographer at the university and you teach a class. So like that's pretty hard to do because I know a lot of people would love to do creative things, but like as you said, like you don't even necessarily recommend that as a career, because it is hard to stick to, right? And to actually make money off of in the long run.
You got to be crazy enough to want to do it and to make it work
Mhm.
at whatever cost.
Yeah.
And that's what I can't teach people is passion. Like I can't teach people, stubborn motivation and passion and just like a relentless pursuit of, their own self-interest, right? Like I can tell you, like, this is a pretty picture, like here's something that looks cool, appreciate it. And they're like, yeah, but just that extra little bit of like sacrifice that comes involved with like being creative. I mean, as I understand it, like becoming an actor means moving to LA and like becoming a bartender, and then maybe you'll get the break or something, right? Like that's
Yeah,
the pipe dream, is to get there, right?
exactly. I think you have to really enjoy it and really want it to the point where you're like, this is the only thing that I can imagine doing, and like, this is really fulfilling to me. So I'm willing to kind of put in the work and maybe have to do other things to get there. Or there's people who are like, I love it, and I can on the weekend go take pictures, but like, I don't need to do that as like as my bread and butter. I can, have just a regular 9 to 5 job and do that on the side. And I think it just depends on where you fall on that spectrum of how much you're willing to put in and how far along that path you want to go to actually pursue that full time.
Yeah, totally. Like creative work just requires that. Like it's a craft, it's an art. Like some people have natural skills and talents for it, but you still got to like hone it and sharpen it. You got to work at it, you know.
Yeah.
Is I kind of joke like this is what I do. Like I'm a photographer. Like I don't do anything else. Whereas other people are like, oh, like I have a full-time job and I do a little bit of photography. Like if I went up to someone who's like, oh, I just do a little bit of law on the side, they'd be like, no, you don't. You're not a lawyer. I'm like, sure I am. I watch a lot of TV.
Yeah, exactly.
You
I know
know?
all about this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, no, I don't know anything about surgery, about being a doctor, about doing dentistry, but like photography is like my thing. Like I went to school for it. I study it all the time. I work at it all the time. It's like my thing. I love it. It's fun, but it's a two-part hobby. You have to have something you photograph.
Right.
You can't just be into cameras
Yeah.
unless you want to build them. So
Yeah. Well, so, okay, for people that are interested in photography, whether it's like just kind of as a hobby, or if it's like photography is something they want to pursue as a career, whether it's photojournalism or just maybe fashion photography, like what would be a good starting point or any advice that you would have for someone that actually wants to pursue this further?
number one, figure out what you want to photograph, what you want to document. Um, if you like sports, do sports photography. If you like nature, go do landscapes, go do macro photography with like insects and plants and close-ups, right? And then just figure out how to do that like really well.
Mm-hmm.
Learn about it, read about it. If you like people and fashion, like go photograph fashion, go photograph your friends wearing their crazy cool outfits, go pick a cool location. So just number one, just kind of know yourself and what your interests are. And if you're like, I really like photographing, but I don't have any other interests, find some other interests and then photograph them. Iron sharpens iron. That's just super helpful. Once you have the skills, what are you going to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
And then just basics, right? Show your work to people. Don't be afraid to show your work to people. You got to. That's the point of photos, is they're like shared experiences, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't make pictures to not show people.
Yeah.
Like
You
I
want to
make
get them.
pictures to show everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you got to get that feedback. And it'll be interesting when people say they like and what people say they don't like, or when people look at photos and they give you this opinion that you're like, I didn't think that. It helps you. It's humbling and it's kind of awful at first, but you sort of learn to love it.
Yeah, because it's like with the photo, it's like, I mean, if you're trying to maybe do like whether it's like fine art photography or you're just photographing nature, like, it's an expression and it's an art form, so you're putting that out to the world for people to see, and people are going to have an opinion and criticize it. So it might not always be positive, and especially if like it's something that means a lot to you and you're like hoping to make a career, I think it can be probably a little overwhelming and scary, but also it's necessary, because if you get, depending on the reaction you're getting, you kind of might know that you're onto something, right?
Yeah.
So you have to share it.
Yeah, you have to, and like me going to school for it, like that was the path I took. You have professors and you have students in the classroom that have different varying degrees of like great to no idea. I was somewhere closer to the no idea probably at the start, you know. But just like hearing what their thoughts and their opinions were, or just like knowing you didn't bring something good to the table, or those days that you do, you're like, all right, cool. Like I'm pretty pumped for it. Uh, you can't hide. It's photography. Like if you want to do photography, you got to show people.
You're only going to get there with practice and by experience and by going out and shooting a bunch and, you know, getting feedback on the pictures, and then maybe realizing you have a knack for taking pictures of people, or maybe you are better at nature or, you know, food or whatever it is. But it's definitely something that you have to try and pursue, and then learn from those mistakes and learn from the feedback that you get.
Yeah, mistakes. That's one of my favorite words, right? Like,
Gotta make mistakes to learn and grow.
yeah, you have to. Like, you know, you got to learn to lose before you can learn how to win. And if you want to, you know, go forward, you have to fail forward. Like, you have to just stumble, but you got to fall forward. You know, like the path forward is not supposed to be smooth. It's just supposed to be forward.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what people forget, you know, and it's hard now when you just get on Instagram or social media or just the old World Wide Web in general, and you just start looking at photographers and you look at people that have been doing it for 5, 10, 15, 40 years, and you look at National Geographic and Sports Illustrated, all you see is that top 10% of what they do. You're not looking at the hardness that took them to get there.
Well, I was going to ask you, so like, what are your feelings, or does it ever bother you that like now today with a smartphone in your pocket, everyone essentially can be a photographer? And so, which there's great things about social media too. Like it allows you to connect to people. You can share your work with a bigger audience than before. But do you think that it's taking away from professional photographers? Like, you know, people that maybe dedicated their lives going to school and honing this craft, now that anyone can, you know, start an Instagram? Like how do you feel about that?
It's cool. Like, first off, like, it's really interesting seeing that everyone does this, right? And to do something for a living that anyone can do with a very low barrier to entry, because like everyone has a camera in one way or another, right? Whether it's like your grandma with an iPad or like your friend with their smartphone, you know. But at some point you just sort of hit a level where there's just a level you got to get through, you know, like you plateau. You know, like using your phone's great. You can make great pictures with your phone. It's all about the moments and the emotions. And for me, like travel, you know, is like I joke with like my students, like, all right, what's the hardest part about photographing the Grand Canyon? And like, this too big, you know, you need a nice camera. And then I just kind of flip it and I go, finding the time to go to the Grand Canyon is the hardest part. Because when you're standing at the edge, you just hit click, right? There's just like one button on your phone in between you and a picture of the Grand Canyon. But getting to that point where you're there is really hard.
Yeah.
So, you know, I say power to the people that, you know, do this for a living and get a bunch of followers using their phones. For me, you know, I'm trying to pursue it in a way that's more pure, more no Photoshop, using all the lighting, you know, all the equipment, that kind of a thing. And with that comes a lot of opportunities that maybe they won't get with their limitations and how they do it.
Does it ever bother you, like when you see maybe people that have invested in a camera, you know, they want to, because as you pointed out, like there's only so much you can do with an iPhone, you know? So like if someone's invested in a camera and is taking photos for like a blog, maybe food or nature, and they don't really have necessarily any formal training, does it ever kind of like bother you that like now there's all these other people that sort of are also in this industry, or is like the competition thicker now because these people that don't necessarily need to go to school for photography are also in the game now? You know, they're getting pictures published in magazines. Or do you not really feel like that's something that you ever think about or is worrisome to you?
Yeah, no, I mean, of course, you know, there's stuff in the like photography world that like bothers me. But, you know, I'm like a little competitive, you know, like I like that. I'm like, come at me a little bit.
Yeah.
You kind of have to be, like, just to get to that point where like this is what I want to do. Like, everyone's a photographer, everyone has a camera, so like what's going to differentiate you?
Yeah.
Maybe it's the end quality of your product. Maybe it's like you make great pictures, these are so cool, everyone loves them. Maybe it's the subject, you photograph something people don't do. But like things that kind of bug me are when I see people that buy tons of equipment and don't know how it works, right? It's like, for instance, I don't know how to drive a stick, but if
Mhm.
I bought a Lamborghini, I'd just tear it apart, right? I have no idea, right? I'd be like, can I get this in an automatic? And then can I drive like 5 under the speed limit because I'm not in a hurry? And you'd be like, why did you buy that? And I'd be like, looks cool.
Yeah, you're not getting any of the
Yeah,
use out of the stuff that you like. You're not using it to its potential.
yeah, for sure. Like that's always like one of the big things people buy. Like, what camera do you recommend? Like, what should I buy? And I just tell them like, whatever you can afford. Like,
Mhm.
that's all you need. If you don't know how it works, you don't need to spend more money than what it's worth to you. I could recommend a $6,000 camera body, a $2,000 lens, then you're 8 grand into it and you have no idea what manual mode looks like. Download an app, start there, see how that works, if you're interested in it, or just go to like Best Buy or wherever and buy a nice like $600 kit and just start from the bottom. You'll have an appreciation for those levels after that.
Yeah, and I think people at the start, when they start, they just want the best because like maybe they're looking at these publications or these Instagrams and they're just like, wait, I want to take that quality. But then you're right, like you don't know the first thing about like shooting, you don't understand lighting and you don't understand how to use this. So I don't think it is necessarily meant for everyone. Like start somewhere, then you'll learn something, you'll understand, then upgrade. And like that's the natural process that you go through in life and anything. Like you kind of have to start at a beginner level and then get better and go up. And I think
Yeah.
with photography, people just they want these images that look a certain way, but it's like there's a lot that goes into the lighting and everything looking a certain way, right? And you need that experience to get there.
Yeah, totally. It's a combination of parts, like what you bring to it, what happens when you're there, the tools you have. If I'm a chef and I'm like, I want to make better pizza, I need a more expensive oven. You're like, do you? Like, maybe you just need better ingredients.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't even know how to make pizza good, right? Like, so what's really the problem here? Like you kind of run into young photographers that have like nice equipment, don't quite use it, they're super competitive, they see me as like the guy that's kind of like been doing it for a while, and you just kind of look at them and you're like, all right, who how would I trade you my camera for your phone? Who do you think is going to make a better photo? Because the power's in the wizard, not the wand, right? Just who's using the tool, how they know how it works, and what they get out of it. It's not equipment, I'll tell you that. Equipment helps when you're trying to do certain specific things. It's real easy to be like, if I just bought this new thing, then I'll be better. But no, you got to dig deep. You got to do some reflecting and some personal development and see what's really holding you back from getting better. And it maybe isn't external causes.
Photojournalism specifically like conveys news, it can convey social issues and all these images, and it can reach a large group of people. So like, whether it's coming from like a news publication or just like an Instagram. But since everyone now also has a smartphone and most people are on social media, like how do you personally think that this affects the industry? Because it's like, then like what's actual news and what's just what is just like someone posting a photo of maybe like a protest, and like sort of where does that line get crossed into where it's now just we're using real people's photos versus this is like stuff that a publication, because I feel like
Mhm.
now what happens is it's so blurry.
You know, there's a lot of power in that, right? Like, um, some Pulitzer Prize photos were made by people that weren't photojournalists. They were just in the right place with the right time with the camera. And
Mhm.
that's the power of the medium, is just getting people to stop and to look at something, to maybe think something they didn't think before. And, it's interesting seeing this, like, citizen journalism. It's kind of like the term, right? Like normal people, back when people had blogs more, back when I was in school, way back when in the dinosaur age of the early 2000s. But that was it, right? Like food critics, you don't have to work for publication. You just got to start a website and you can go do your own, you can toot your own horn, you can write your own paper.
Yeah, or
You
Yelp.
know,
There's some serious
right?
professional Yelp reviewers.
All of that. Like there's wild jobs these days, and it's all based around communication. And, we talk about truth and objectivity, and it's all relative. Spoiler alert. Sorry, y'all. Facts are facts. You can talk about confirmation bias within science too, right? People just trying to prove things that they believe. When they
Yeah,
find a bunch of facts that prove it, it doesn't mean that it's true.
exactly.
It just means that that's the conclusion at which they came from. And good journalism is going to take into account both sides. My issue, with that is people always bring a side to an article and they read it in a certain way and then they get all hot and bothered about it. But if you take someone with a different perspective and they read it and they're like, no, that's not what that says. I'm like, that's exactly what that says. And you're like, people are looking at the same thing and have different opinions. So even just in communicating it is a challenge. People are going to be people, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially with this, as you said, this like citizens journalism, like everyone's a journalist, everyone's a photojournalist. So if you're at the right place in the right time and you have a camera phone, or you take video, like you're now breaking a story, whether it's on Twitter or on Instagram, right? And that might be just from your perspective, maybe from where you were standing or where you were videotaping, it's painted like this, and then you get the other story, and that can also like cloud what's going on, because as a journalist, you're trained to tell a story in a certain way, right? And just to report facts, and you're not really supposed to pick a side. But I think a lot what happens with just people is because they're not necessarily trained to do that, and they're just showing what they saw. Things spread like wildfire on social media. Like how many times have we seen positive and negative things? Something gets posted, it goes viral, but it's not really, it's just like one part of a story. And then later you find out, oh, actually it's because so-and-so did blah, blah, blah. And then it makes sense. But that's because that's what's happening now. But like back in the day, you didn't know about something. If you weren't there, you didn't know about it till you read it in the news the next day. Like that's it. That's how you found out.
And the power of that is the next day because there's time involved.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one really powerful tool that a lot of current journalism seems to have lost a little bit. It's just the time, we have time to wait and to make these phone calls and to verify these facts and to read these quotes back to these people. Now everything's so immediate. Everyone's just jumping the gun. And, there's times that it works. There's times that it's great. It's breaking news.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to know things as it happens. But, within that, there's fumbles. And, like it's really cool, though, with photos because photos are photos, like
Yeah.
you can definitely make some photos that are misrepresentative, right? Like going back to just how, everyone's a citizen journalist. I love it with Instagram right now. I love it. Like all the protests that's going on in the world, all the other, police violence and the documentation that's going from citizens is just fantastic. Like they don't need to be professionals.
Yeah.
They're just doing it. And that speaks volumes for itself because without their ability to document this stuff, we wouldn't have it.
No, and I think people right now especially want to hear from just like normal people, just normal civilians. Like they want a person on the ground's point of view, and they want to see what's going on. Like that's what they're interested in, not necessarily because we've built this, we're in this kind of wave where everyone doesn't trust the media anymore, right? And the people are just really like unsure of what to believe. So it's almost like you would rather just look to someone like you and me, or someone that's attending like a protest, or someone that's in the heart of a situation, just to see what's going on, whether it's from a photo they took or an Instagram story. And that is the power of that. And there's definitely lots of things that can go wrong with that, and it can be spun in also horrible ways. So keeping that in mind when you're watching these stuff is like, take it with a grain of salt. And because as you said, like everyone takes their own spin on it. So I think it's a great tool, but you have to be smart in the way that you're using it and processing it.
Yeah, I don't sometimes think people are smart enough to protect themselves from their own mental health, like you got to think about your mental diet, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, fun example, if I go to work and there's usually like a bunch of sweets, you know, they're telling me like, Sam, you should eat some pie today, when I never wanted it to begin with, but it's there, so I'm gonna take it, right? But if I woke up and was like, man, I really like a cookie today, that sounds good, I don't think I'll have one, and then I go to work and there's cookies, I'm like, it was meant to be, I'm gonna take a cookie. So if you get online and people just scroll endlessly because they don't even know what to think about,
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
literally just looking for things to do with their time. And then they find these stories and they go in these rabbit holes about things they didn't even care about when they woke up. And now that's all they can think about. And I think it's a shame that people have, for, you know, even just brief amounts of time, are losing their own free will to think about what they want to think about and to spend their time and their energy how they determine it. And that's when they can blame the media, because the media is giving them stories but they're not telling them to read it, you know.
Yeah, there's like, I guess there's like a balance of like the stuff that you're being tempted to watch, to scroll through, and also like your own personal will of being like, I'm not looking at my phone today, or, you know, I'm not doing this. And you really have to do that, because you're right. Like, I have gotten sucked. I'm sure we all have. I've gotten sucked down rabbit holes of like animal videos or something. Like, maybe I'm busy and I'm like, I pick up my phone to do something and something distracts you, or you see a photo of somebody maybe you knew back in high school or whatever. And then you just go down this rabbit hole, either stalking someone or watching videos about cats or dogs or something. And then I'm like, wait, that's not what I was on my phone for. And like, that happens all the time. And you're right. Like, just because it's there doesn't mean you need to be engaging with it, scrolling with it, interacting with it. And like, we also have to take the responsibility of like, you can't just keep being like, social media is bad, it's distracting. Well, what are you doing about that? Like, are you taking any, are you doing something to stop yourself? You know,
I'm posting about it, that's what I'm doing, I'm posting about it, you know.
it's ironic that you keep posting about how bad it is, yet you don't see that you're part of this problem. Like, stop. You teach a class on visual communications at the University of Missouri, right? Um, so tell me exactly, like, what are you teaching your students, and what are things that you do in class every day?
It's a really cool class. They didn't have it when I went to school here.
Yeah.
um, I really wish they did. I mean, I made it, you know, it's like I work at the university now as a photographer, I've been doing this for years, I teach this class now, but there's still a little bit of that, like, why didn't they have this when I was there, you know. uh, so it's really cool. It's like 5 different components. It's visual communication, so it starts off with 5 weeks of photography. So out of the gate I get my bread and butter, right? We get to talk photography. And then we go into audio. So even though it's not visual, in order to learn video, you got to learn audio first, right? So they do like podcasts, we do little like trailers, and they do like news stories, you know, go interview one person, make like a minute project, interview 2 people, do like a 2-minute project. And then they do the video component. So they got to go, and everything's with their phone. They do photos with their phones, they record audio with their phones, the voice memos, they shoot video with their phones, and then they edit it using like Adobe programs like Photoshop and Premiere and stuff. And then we teach them design as well. So things like social media, those are all just, you know, Instagram stories. It's like baby design class right there, all right, you know. So we teach them those different components, and we teach them both like journalism, news, like this is the news approach, this is journalism, this is truth and accuracy and storytelling. And then we teach them strategic communication, which is a little more marketing and advertising, a little more intent based. So it's really cool to teach them how to, like, all right, here's photojournalism, photo stories, and then like a fun photo illustration, like have fun with it, like hard news video project, and then like make like a goofy trailer highlight video, you know. So that's what we do in the class.
It sounds so like, I understand how you feel, because it's like, oh, why wasn't that available to us? But like, if you think about when we were in school, like, social media wasn't what it was when we were in college. So like, now there's literally like social media marketing positions. So like, there's all these schooling and education around, because it's not like before, journalism and photojournalism was more just for like news, like hard journalism. Now like you're learning how to do stuff like you say, like if it's going to be for an Instagram story or a Facebook ad, and there's kind of more of like this fun marketing element. And it's really cool that now people are getting access to learn this stuff like in school, because like you or me, like when I'm trying to film my own stuff, I had to learn all this on my own, like outside. Like it wasn't something that was taught to me in school. So it's like, if I want to promote my YouTube channel or promote something I was in, I have to go and learn how to do these things and figure out how to film something with good audio quality, how to use a camera, how to do all these things. And I feel like that's kind of like a lot of our generation is just like learning on the fly. Like we weren't necessarily introduced to this as early. So you just got to learn as you do it. But it's really awesome. Like that class sounds so fun. And like people are going to get to be exposed to all of this stuff and go into the world like knowing all these skills that are so important right now.
I'm very grateful that I get to do this every day, and that I get to share this with people, not just through the work that I do, but just by working with young people that want to get to this position, because I know what it's like to go through that and to not have a future, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I graduated in a recession in 2009, right? So good luck finding full-time photographer jobs anywhere anyway, let alone during, you know, hard times. So yeah, just had one of our photographers, she just got a job after she graduated. I was super pumped for her. She got, you know,
Especially right now too, with everything going on.
yeah, you know, it's crazy. So it's one thing if you want to be a photographer and work for yourself and try and charge people, you know, that you got to play that game. But it's totally another if you're like, I want to work for newspapers or magazines or like work for an employer, because not many places have full-time photographers on staff.
And that's actually interesting because like I, you know, like a lot of people love maybe not necessarily like fashion photography, but I mean like people that are taking photos of whether it's like extreme sports or nature, like Natural Geographic type stuff, or food. Like they would dream of working for like Condé Nast or something like that, and like working for these big brands or publications where you are a staff photographer and you're being sent to all these places. But I'm sure, as you're saying, that's pretty rare, right? Like to be a full-time staff photographer for like a publication like that.
Oh yeah, that's like be like, I like playing football, I want to go to the NFL. It's like, good luck. That's a pipe dream.
Yeah.
You and millions of others, my friend, you know. You got to do it. You got to do it regardless of what for, you know. You got to do it for yourself. That's why I don't recommend people do this as a profession. If like you think like, oh, I'm just gonna go to a college and get a degree and go work for Nat Geo, I'm just like, good luck.
Yeah.
Because good luck, like just in general, like maybe that path works for you, maybe it doesn't, but just you got to be open-minded that you just want to do this regardless, whether it's acting or music or art, however you want to express yourself, doing a creative profession, like you just have to do it because. And if you get a break, if you're in the right place at the right time, so be it.
Do you find that most people that like, you know, go through with photography like you did, because I mean you ended up getting a job at a newspaper and like working for universities, but like do most people do go that route, or do they try to get hired by a magazine, or do they just do like they start their own business where they're like, I'm going to shoot weddings and and like headshots? Like what do you think the most common route, or that maybe like one that you would recommend for someone to start off?
It seems like it's all over, you know. I've got some classmates that just do like marketing, you know, like people I went to school with the photography class, right? Like they just do marketing for places.
Mm-hmm.
Other people, one of my good friends is actually another university photographer out for the University of Wyoming. Kyle Spradley, you're amazing. He does landscapes like no other. He's fantastic, right? And he's just, you know, that guy that's just like, all right, I'm just gonna go shoot landscapes and like live in Wyoming. It's just breathtaking, right?
Yeah.
Breathtaking work. He does it regardless, you know, but he made it work for him. And then you get other people that, you know, they love their families and their kids, and they get into doing family photography and just beautiful portrait lifestyle work.
Mm-hmm.
And that just going back to my original advice, you just got to figure out what you want to do, and you
Mhm.
can just make it work. If you have the skills and you have the abilities and you have the knowledge to do something, like, you're just going to do it. So it's kind of cool to see how different people have expressed themselves. I've some classmates, one, who just got published in the New York Times, probably again, you know, um, other just crazy things like that, right?
Yeah.
And it's all over. It's just what you want to do with it.
Thank you so much for like expressing sort of all of the knowledge that you have and like sharing your experience with me. And I think like you bring a really refreshing perspective to not only photography, but just to um, like being someone who is full time doing something that's their passion and their hobby. You've managed to turn it into a successful career and sort of learn along the ways the things that work for you, the things that don't. And I think it's really good to hear your perspective. And you're very candid and open about the advice that you give to people about doing it, because it's not easy pursuing something like photography or any other art. So yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today.
Yeah, well, no, thanks for having me and getting to share some of this. I hope it's insightful for whoever listens. Feel free for anyone to reach out to me with any thoughts. Obviously, negative. We talked about how I eat that up, I guess, right? So, open door for criticism right here. But yeah, any other positive thoughts, or if people just want to connect, I like talking. This pandemic, so
Right.
connect, please.
We have time to, and I'll make sure that I share your website information and
Yeah.
Instagram. So, like, if anyone wants to check out your work or contact you through Instagram, they will have the opportunity to do so too. I hope you guys enjoyed today's conversation. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.